Hi there. Welcome to the Sam Sorbo Show. And today I have a special guest with me, Rick Green, who is a former Texas representative. He's a national speaker, also an author and a radio host. He's very outspoken on all things regarding the history of this nation and where we stand today and politics and all of that stuff. And so welcome to the show, Rick. It's good to see you again.
Hey, Sam. Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
So we set this, you were on the show last week, actually, and it just didn't seem like there was enough time. And I knew that there was going to be some heavy stuff coming down the pike this week. Obviously, we all did. That wasn't like any kind of prescience on my part, but I thought, come back on for a full hour. Let's really dive into this and take it apart for people. And frankly, for me, I need some help here. What I saw at the Capitol just a few days ago was amazing to me, and what we've just been through is amazing. What I'm seeing on social media and just in the media in general is blowing me away. So where do you want to start?
Well, just being honest, the January 6th turned out to be what could have been a great day for the Constitution, regardless of the outcome of the vote, the opportunity to educate the American people on how this works and let them see our members of Congress intellectually debating an important issue and coming to a conclusion. Instead of that, Sam, I see it as probably the greatest victory for cultural Marxism in my lifetime, and the greatest defeat for those who love the Constitution and love America and love what we stand for. This was there's no nice way to put it, a very, very bad day, and it's going to have ramification for decades to come.
So I struggle because I know I saw election fraud. I know I saw it in myriad ways. And yet I would say half the country don't even think that that's just a complete fantasy. Where are we as a nation when half the nation doesn't even acknowledge a truth that is so abundantly evident?
It's almost like parallel universes right now. I mean, there are literally two sets of facts,
exactly,
and two narratives, and this was the opportunity for those two crowds, if you will, those two groups of people who are in their own echo chambers, based on the way our social media works now, and what our media has morphed into. It was an opportunity for those two groups to finally be listening to the same folks and finally be, sitting down and having a peaceful discussion to come to a resolution of what we disagreed on, to finally hear a lot of those facts from those states be presented. And it was hijacked. And unfortunately, those members of Congress who came in willing to debate and object in order to debate and then debate those issues had their decisions changed, not by the debate or by principles, but by emotion and violence. And that's a sad day for our country and for our Constitution.
Do you see the way that it's depicted in the news these days? Do you struggle with that?
Oh man, I mean, it's I knew as soon as the breach at the Capitol occurred, I started grieving, because I mean, we know how this works. We know how that will be used. We know the double standard. We know the images will forever be painted against anyone who calls himself a patriot or loves the Constitution or wants to uphold the rule of law and the way our Constitution works. What we saw at the Capitol will now be, we will be accused of that, even though we came out immediately and said how wrong it was and how evil it was, and the destruction of property like this should never be done. Sam, I think that unfortunately those who wrapped themselves in the flag and destroyed property in that way have done more damage to our cause than those who desecrated the flag and burned cities for the last 7 months. That's not fair. That's not just. I mean, that's just the facts. That's the way that the left will use this. And I think a lot of people got caught up in what happened on that day. I think there's no doubt there were anarchists that antagonized and created the scenario and abused the situation. I think our side was ill prepared. I don't think in any way that Donald Trump revved up a crowd or incited all these things that he's being claimed of right now. If you watch the speeches, nothing like that happened. But this is a very, very dangerous situation now because of what happened and how it's being used against us. If you watch the speeches afterwards, I'm telling you, I watched every speech by every senator and congressman because I had to take my own medicine. I had said earlier in the day at about 1:30 when the good speeches were going on. I mean, there were great speeches happening from both sides. I mean, I found myself listening to Adam Schiff make his argument for why the electors should be accepted. I think this is a good speech. I mean, he's making good points, even though I disagree with him. And it was a great opportunity for debate. And so I was on some TV show at the time as we were watching this stuff happen live. And I said, man, wouldn't it be great if people would just sit down and listen to both sides of the debate and then decide what their position will be on what happened? And so after everything, all the riots and they came back together, I said, well, I guess I have to take my own medicine and sit and listen and watch every speech, even though the tone obviously changed and it became, a lot of sanctimonious, self-righteous, I think, hypocrisy from those who would not speak out against the rioting all summer long as our cities burned because it was their activist. Now, all of a sudden that it was at their doorstep and they could place the blame on conservatives. They're saying all the same things we've been saying all year long. So I'm glad at least they're finally against rioting and destruction of property. But it's a shame, man, what it took to get them there.
You make me think of all the memes of the abject destruction that we saw in our cities, with buildings being burned to the ground, businesses being absolutely ruined, and in Baltimore, in St. Louis, in Seattle, right? And
night after night after night, right?
Night after night. Yeah. And them being called mostly peaceful protests, right? And then you had a group of a large mob, right, on the lawn of the Capitol, where there was very little destruction. There were certainly no fires. There was some shooting. They're still trying to investigate that, but that is the worst day in American history. Do you know what I mean? Like the way that it's
compared to December 7th, right? I mean, Chuck Schumer had the nerve to compare this to 8 battleships being sank and all the loss of life at Pearl Harbor, and he had the nerve to compare this to that when we've lost at least 60 people in the riots from BLM and Antifa in the riots, and another 4,000 murders the result of the policies that have been adopted in defunding the police in the cities. We got 4,000 more murders right now out of 2020 than the average of the last 5 years because of what they did. And yet, and look, I know you've said the same thing. We all have. I've seen Kevin's tweets as well. I mean, we've all denounced what happened. Obviously, it shouldn't have happened, and it was wrong. And we think they should be prosecuted for what happened at the Capitol. But my goodness, to suddenly decide that you think that potentially our nation has a coup going on, and suddenly to use words like insurrection and it's just, I mean, I hate to say it. I had to, I was looking for the barf bag many times as I watched those speeches. It was just
so hold on. Let me slow down just a second, because you bring up an interesting point. And I want to say that it has seemed to me that every time the left accuses the right of doing something, it's something that they're already doing.
Man,
so
right
the Russia collusion hoax, they were already colluding with Russia. The Ukraine thing, they had already done the Ukraine thing. And so I look at it and I say, we're accused, or the Trump supporters are accused of attempting a coup. I feel like there was just a coup against democracy, or against a democratic republic, the rule of democracy, because somebody hijacked the election. And we're not even allowed to see the investigation of that because the courts are refusing to hear the cases. Am I wrong?
Sam, you've got biblical level discernment and wisdom with what you just said. That is exactly what their game plan has been all along. It's textbook Marxism. They project or blame their opposition for the very thing that they're doing. And now we're seeing it even right now with the calls for invoking the 25th Amendment, for impeaching President Trump for supposedly, being incendiary, and him supposedly being the one to stage a coup. Do you realize that right now, Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz and these members of Congress are being accused of treason and sedition. We're talking about attempts to prosecute and put them to death for simply using the exact same constitutional procedures that Democrats have used for the last 3 Republican presidential elections, and that Nancy Pelosi herself said was democracy at work whenever Democrats were the ones objecting. But now that Republicans are objecting and asking for evidence simply to be shown that we have legal electoral votes, they are accused of sedition and treason. And no question, they're doing exactly what you're saying. They're trying
What
to.
did you
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What did you think of Lynn Wood coming out and saying that that Mike Pence should be accused of treason if he doesn't behave the way that Lynn
Yeah,
Wood wanted him to behave?
I
That was a
denounced it. I
treason.
mean, Lynn has been unhinged for the last month. I supported him certainly in getting Kyle Rittenhouse out of jail and defending Kyle Rittenhouse. I think that's a shame what happened to that young man. And I even donated to the cause to help get this kid that was using the Second Amendment appropriately and actually very tactically well, by the way, if you watch the videos, and how he did not hurt anyone that was innocent. And so I was so disappointed when first Lynn called for people not to vote in Georgia. That's the dumbest plan you could possibly come up with for how to properly protest a bad election system. But then look, I was one of the ones leading the charge and advocating for Vice President Pence that he had the option of rejecting or accepting electors based on what he saw. Or at least opening it up to debate, or even postponing the vote so that he could wait for the legislatures to let him know what their choice was, since they were the ones constitutionally empowered. But we said from the beginning, this has been debated for centuries. There is no clear path. It is that there have been arguments on all sides by great constitutional minds as to what the vice president can do, what the House can do, and what the Senate can do. To claim that Vice President Pence, in reviewing all of that, chose one of those very proper paths is somehow grounds for him being the one accused of not following the Constitution. I just thought that was unhinged. It disappointed me greatly.
So, and I saw it as strategic. Not that I'm not. I didn't condemn it because I wondered, because there's so much that's happening behind the scenes that I can't possibly know, and I know that, right?
Yeah.
And so I looked at it and I saw it as possibly, and I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying, well, what if it was a strategic move in order to lay ground cover so that, cover fire so that Pence could do the right thing and say, I had to do it this way because otherwise I'd be accused of treason.
Yeah, I just, man, I think it actually opened the door for that kind of terminology. And first of all, I consider Pence an honorable man. I've known him 25 years. He loves the Lord. He loves the Constitution. He hasn't always done what I wanted. He has caved on issues like the bathroom bill in Indiana and things like that. There's been times when he didn't do what I wanted him to do. But he's always, especially in this case. I mean, frankly, I thought his statement that was released right at the beginning of the debates was good. I thought he made a cogent argument for why he had chose the path he did.
Right.
Even closed out with a phrase you and I use often: "Duty is ours, results are God's," from John Quincy Adams.
Right.
So yeah, I think all of this talk of treason and these extreme examples, when all we're asking for is debate, and all we're asking for is the Constitution to be followed, and I think we all think, not we all, but most of us realize, even Democrats, 17% of Democrats, as Cruz said, that the election was not accurate, that there was fraud, that there was illegal actions taking place. And so it causes us to doubt the outcome. It's going to cause us to not want to follow things that are passed by this president or signed by this president. It's created mayhem in our country, but it doesn't allow us, or we should not be the ones to begin to call for these extreme measures. Instead of, I've never even been for the idea of martial law for, seizing the machines and some of the measures that others have advocated for. I think the president has actually done a good job of balancing this approach. It's why I'm so upset with the Democrats right now for calling for his head, literally, when he could have been more demanding, and he denied those attempts at martial law and all of those things, and I think took the right path. And pushing for, the constitutional process to take place. And granted, his rhetoric is sometimes, ugly, like Winston Churchill. I mean, he is our Churchill. He's very much like Winston Churchill was, but it was not anything like what Nancy Pelosi and others claimed the other night, and in their speeches, and now are setting him up for potentially prosecution based on what I think any person that cares about the Constitution would have done.
They have to. They have to prosecute him. They have to walk their own narrative to its final conclusion.
They want to kill the movement. They want to make sure he can't run in 2024. It's not enough. It's not enough for these people to take the presidency, the House, and the Senate. They want to destroy anyone that opposes them or speaks out against them. And that is so obvious in their rhetoric right now. And it's exactly what you said earlier. That's why I said, it's biblical level of discernment, because they're using, what they're doing is destroying the Constitution, and it is destroying free speech and all of these things. And yet while they're doing it, they accuse us, they accuse our side of being the ones that are undermining our republic. It's amazing to watch. And frankly, our side has not done a very good job of responding or articulating the response.
But don't you think that that's because we play by the rules?
Yeah. No, it's kind of like it's kind of like in campaigns, right? Same thing. We play by the rules. The other side doesn't. It puts us at a disadvantage. And frankly, we don't play tough enough. I think Dinesh D'Souza is 100% right on this. And Trump card, he talks about it. He said this on a panel we were on together in San Diego before the election. And he told the story of how Lincoln in 1863, the Confederates were literally assassinating any black troops that they captured from the Union. And Lincoln said, enough of this. He issued literally an executive order and said, for every Union troop that is executed, every black Union troop that is executed by the Confederates, we will execute a Confederate POW. Now that's extreme. They're at war, and Lincoln is not given, as Dinesh says, he was a moderate man. He was not given to that kind of thing, but he had to fight fire with fire. I'm not suggesting that we cheat because they cheat, but I am absolutely suggesting we use the tools at our fingertips. I was disappointed in a lot of my friends that are in Congress who got hung up on these technicalities, and I think a warped view of the Constitution. They actually took the position, Sam, that you could never, ever reject electors from a state. I think that's crazy. If a state is taken over by some radical dictator and their legislature disbanded, and the dictator sends a slate of electors to Washington, D.C., are we supposed to accept those and not object to those? And that's what these...
Didn't multiple states send more than one set of electors?
They did, yes.
So how did they choose which electors? Did they accept them all?
Exactly right. Exactly right. How is the vice president and Congress to open and count electors if they have two slates of electors? Now, granted, they did try to stack the deck here and say that, well, based on the 1887 law, only this slate of electors is signed by the governor. But that's why Louis Gohmert and others raised the constitutional questions that are legitimate constitutional questions of who can authorize the electors, who has the power. The Constitution only empowers the legislature. There's nothing about governors. They debated this at the Constitutional Convention. They didn't want governors making these decisions about the presidency. And that's what we were trying to debate. That's what the objections were all about. And you have states where actually the scenario I just described is not far off. We had dictators changing election law at the last minute in these states because they had been dictators all year long with regard to COVID, making up law on their own without their legislatures. They did that with regard to election law, and we're not supposed to question the outcome of that election whenever they broke the Constitution.
That's a tough, the problem that I see is we're still trying to color inside the lines.
Yeah.
But they're busy erasing the lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if they erase the lines faster than we can color, then the picture's theirs. The analogy falls apart, but you see what I'm saying.
No, I see exactly what you're saying. I'll try another analogy. I've been saying, my friends Chip Roy and Tom Cotton and all these guys, that it's like it's like they're having this nice, sweet, high school debate, while the other side is in the trenches scratching and clawing and destroying our country. And I wasn't even asking these guys to do something extra constitutional. I was asking them to do what constitutionalists have argued for centuries was allowed. This goes back to, literally 1821, they had a massive debate on this in the joint session. So much so they had to gavel down people that were screaming and yelling. And in that election, Sam, it wasn't even going to change the outcome. Monroe won in a landslide, and they were debating the Missouri electors because they knew a precedent would be set. And they said, does the vice president have power? Does the House have power? Does the Senate?
Right.
So I just think it's self-righteous, to be honest, and to say I'm going to stand for the Constitution, and because of my constitutional duty, we cannot even debate this because that would violate federalism and it would overturn the results of what a state has sent to us. That's ignoring what the real battlefield is, and allowing for a speech that makes you sound like a constitutionalist, but in fact is ignoring the forest for the trees.
So this brings me to another point. I've seen at least one article now saying, hey, maybe the United States is going to fall apart. Have you seen that?
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of calls and emails and people saying, should we secede? Should we do this? Are we done? Is it time for a national divorce? Sam, I tell you, it feels like that. I hope that's not where we are. I believe we can still save the republic if we actually engage enough, if churches get engaged, if the 30 million Christians that stayed home get off their rears and actually get engaged in the process and do their duty as citizens. Even states like California could be saved. But it requires the church to wake up, and it requires citizens to do their duty and not expect some president to save the day. We put our faith in one election and think that that's going to turn everything around. It takes hard work to have a free nation, to have a republic. It takes citizen activity. If you don't want dictatorships, then you got to be citizens that are engaged in the process, right? And I do think we're split at a point where we do have parallel universes. I think part of the solution is getting back to true federalism, to actually allow the states to do what they want in terms of their environments and their laws, not having the federal government dictate to us, and have the court. The court's been so meddling in our lives for the last 50 years. And this year, they've not done the one thing we've asked them to do in the Constitution, defend the Constitution. The one time they're supposed to be involved.
It does feel like it's going only one way. It only ever falls the one way.
Heads they win, tails we lose.
But I'm going to go back to what you started this portion. Anyway, the way you started this thought, let's say, if we don't want to live under a dictatorship.
Yeah.
If we don't want to live under a dictatorship. And then the question is, maybe we do.
Yeah.
Because I would put to you that maybe more than half of the public prefer a dictatorship.
Sorry about that. I'm coming right back to you.
Oh, something happened. Okay. I'm not sure what happened. Some technology thing. Were you so offended by what I just said that you signed off?
Well, since I have a face for radio, it made more sense to just have a black screen and I would talk instead of be seen. Yeah. So,
okay.
No, I think what you're hitting on is right. I think there is a laziness and kind of a snowflake.
Well, mind you, we've been educated to think that the dictatorship is the way to go.
And that they'll take care of us, right?
We're told to listen to our teachers. We're not allowed to speak out. You have to raise your hand in class in order to ask permission to ask a question. So you're not allowed to learn unless somebody determines that you're worthy of learning. We move to the sound of a bell. We've all been basically
conditioned.
Honestly, it's a wonder that anybody wants to be free.
Yeah.
After the conditioning that we undergo.
It's conditioned. We've been conditioned in that way. And now we have a snowflake generation. Instead of being the land of the free and the brave, we've become the land of the timid and easily imprisoned, frankly. It's even gotten to the point, Sam, where I tell my kids when we separate to head different ways Instead of saying be safe, I say be dangerous. Be dangerous to the enemy, be an existential threat to tyranny. There was a great, do you remember when that the first space shuttle disaster? I mean, I was in high school. I was a freshman in high school, and Reagan came out and he gave this incredible speech. It's one of the best ones that he gave. Peggy Noonan wrote it, and he said in that speech, the future does not belong to the faint-hearted, but to the brave. And he literally looked at the camera, and I was a school kid. I mean, he looked at the children of our nation, and he said, I know you're struggling with this, and you may wonder why we would explore space and do all of these things, but everyone on that shuttle knew what they were doing, and they signed up for that kind of not just adventure, but that necessary expansion of mankind, and don't let it intimidate you. And I just remember it being such a great incentive to be courageous and not be intimidated. Where is that right now? Right? Where are those people that will stand up and say, I'm not going to be a snowflake and be intimidated? We need pastors willing to do that. There was a historian in the 18th century that said of founding fathers pastors, they were not men shaken by the wind. Reeds shaken by the wind was the way he said it, but they were mighty men of courage. And that's what we need right now in our pulpits and in our homes, and to talk about those kind of examples and challenge our people, so that we're not conditioned to just follow whatever the guy on television or the lady on television says, but instead start thinking for ourselves and start being courageous. At least courage is contagious. When people like you stand up, Sam, and say the things you're saying, when we do what we're doing, the good news is when you raise the banner, people will rally. So if courage is contagious, like what we saw initially when Josh Hawley stood up, and then Ted Cruz, and then 11 more senators and 140 congressmen, it just started snowballing, and it was headed in a great direction. Courage is contagious. So let's all be super spreaders. Let's be super spreaders of courage.
So courage is contagious, but also leadership. If you take the role of leadership, people will follow, because people seek to follow. Yeah. And it reminds me, if you go back in the Bible, they demanded a king.
Yeah.
They said to God, it's not enough. We need a king. Please give us a king. We want a king. And God said, no, you don't. You don't want to. Yeah. No, we do. And I feel like, we're so, the human condition, I don't think, is one of desiring responsibility, because freedom equals responsibility. It's a double-edged sword, if you will. And so once you learn to enjoy it, once you learn how it works, it's wonderful. But at the same time, if you learn to be subservient and to follow the leader, which is a game that we play as children, then you're going to be disinclined to take on the responsibility. And if the government will step in and take care of you, and of course that is the promise of Marxism, it's no wonder that people are seduced by that. So I don't know if waking up the church is going to be enough. I think the church needs to be educated.
It does.
I think Americans need to be educated to understand. But also, I was thinking about this, the way that we feel today. I mean, I feel bereft. There's been a great loss, and I feel it. And at the same time, I think back to the founding, the shot heard round the world. Somebody likened the young woman who died in the Capitol to be the newest shot heard round the world. When the revolution started, when the American Revolution started, there was a good proportion of people who were living here, colonists, who disagreed with the revolutionaries, who thought that they were absurd and obscene, taking on England and saying that we were going to disconnect from our sovereign king. And how dare they? I'm sure of that, right?
Yeah, no question. 25% for it, 25% against it, 50% in the middle, not even paying attention. Yeah.
So assuming that, I mean, if you think of it that way, that's probably where we are today. There's a good proportion of people who are absolutely against the abdication of thought that happened on the Capitol on Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah. You got
and
me
then
thinking. You got me really thinking right now because, you use the shot heard around the world. I think the closer comparison is 5 years before at the Boston Massacre because, frankly, the folks at the Boston Massacre were not, in the right entirely. I mean, they're throwing ice balls at these British soldiers and they were an unruly mob. Let's be frank about it. But what happened as a result of that? That's really where the revolution began. That was where it shook people out of their slumber and woke people up. And so, while I absolutely condone what happened on Wednesday, it could be that the response across the nation is, "Are you kidding me? We're gonna shoot this gal that was there at the Capitol." And no one had lit anything on fire or hurt anyway. I think you could see that kind of response from some, but you're right. There's going to be a massive number of people that just want to sit back and let government solve other problems. They're in fear right now. So when you're in fear, you tend to want somebody else to act and somebody else to solve the problem. But I do think the millions of people out there that have been awakened this year can get that education you're talking about, can
But
learn.
it's interesting the role of fear in all of this, right? Because we've been in a corporate state of fear for months.
Yeah. Oh, this has
And
been I mean, you look at the progression of what's happened. It is like I said, a Marxist textbook Marxist plan. What has happened over the last year? The Marxism thing was for 50 years has been in the classroom, theoretical, and for about 30 years in politics with what Alinsky taught the Clintons and the Obamas and others. And now for the last 9 months, we've seen it in our streets. Being used by dictators in governors' mansions across the country, and then by those in the streets creating violence. And then we saw it in the election process. So you can bet, I mean, they're winning right now. They're winning the culture war. And that's why we've got to get smart. We've got to get tactical. We've got to understand rhetoric and how to fight the propaganda machine, because that's where they're really going to be hammering us in the coming months and years. And
it's an astonishment. I'm absolutely flabbergasted that Twitter and Facebook saw fit to remove Donald Trump, literally the sitting president of the United States.
Yeah.
Removed.
Silence the president of the United States. Now they are somehow.
And by the way, they weren't the first to do it because the network stopped carrying his rallies and stuff.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
And
don't forget what he did. I mean, he called for the mob to stop.
No, they didn't want to hear that.
But they didn't want it. Exactly right.
That didn't fit the narrative that he was calling for the mob. So actually, I wanted to ask you, what laws were broken?
You're talking about on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Well, I would say first, just the breaching of the barriers. And now, granted, there's two different stories out there right now. There's clear video of the police letting.
What's the name? What's the sort of provincial term for the Capitol building?
I'm not sure. What do you mean?
Isn't it called the People's House?
Oh, I got you. Okay. Yeah. Sure. But
so
I do think
laws were broken. There were some barriers that belonged to.
Well, there were barriers that were broken. I think you have the right to make sure that even in a peaceable assembly, that there are limits to where you can go in a building at that time, even to the House floor itself. And I mean, if you want to get specific, when you start breaking windows, and literally beating down doors, taking doors off of hinges and literally breaking windows, and I would say at that point you're definitely destroying public property. And
right.
And there does have to be some level of, I mean, look, I've been to that Capitol many times. And even Barton the other day on our radio program said, he's been there 1,000 times. He said, I've never, ever been there and seen the Capitol Police not be able to handle a situation and not be prepared for it. And in this case, they weren't. I mean, why was it that on one side of the building, they were literally opening the barriers? The Capitol Police was, and
right.
inviting people in.
Right. I heard that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the videos. I can't figure it out. I can't put it together. It is a strange situation. I've talked to people that were there. There's no doubt there were Antifa instigators that infiltrated. It wasn't all of them. I mean, obviously there were Trump supporters in there as well that were fed up and I think maybe got caught up in the process, but they were absolutely wrong for what they did. But it is weird what happened. I can't understand how there were places where There was no sense of violence, and everybody's walking around taking pictures and in the
Right.
Capitol peacefully. And then
Right.
there's clear video of major clashes. I think you probably know Michelle Bachmann. She was there, former Congresswoman. She was there in the prayer room. I don't know if you've been in there, but there's a private prayer room off the side from the House floor. Washington painting in there where, he's kneeling to pray. And she was in there praying minutes before all this happened. And she talks about how it all played out. It's crazy. I don't know if we'll ever know, right, exactly what happened that day. But man, I mean, there's no question that it's going to go down as a sad day for America.
Well,
and for
it's
our cause.
interesting to remark that there is censorship that's happening, right? There are certain things that can't be said. There's certain stuff that has to come with a disclaimer. I saw a Washington Post article that the president was objecting to a duly elected leader or new president. Basically saying that any claims that there was any kind of election improprieties are completely patently false, as if all election improprieties have been disproven at this point.
Even though no court has heard the facts or decided on the merits.
There's no way for them to have been disproven, and yet they are declared as disproven because just on the face of them, they're not possible. It's absurd. And the one thing that springs to my mind is every time I see a disclaimer that Twitter puts on, or YouTube or Facebook, whatever, that says this is a disputed claim, the only reason they put that on has to be because it's true.
That it's actually disputed. That's a great point. Yeah. So if it's disputed, why are we not allowed to hear both sides? I mean, to stop free speech.
If it's something that hasn't been proven, then just let it go.
Exactly.
Because it's true, they have to say it's been disputed. It's an odd thing that actually sort of gives me hope, because the truth will out. The truth is the truth, and it's impermeable. It's intolerant, by the way. The truth is the most intolerant thing there is.
That's right.
So I go back to the story of Gideon and whittling down the troops to 300, and these ideas that just because you're the underdog doesn't mean that you give up the fight.
That's right.
But I do have this sense of tremendous loss, and it's not the Trump presidency.
That's right.
It's the loss of truth. It's the loss of honor. It's the fact that so many in this republic are willing to betray honesty in order to get what they want.
Yeah, the lack of intellectual integrity and honesty in debate is lost right now. You said it. I mean, it wasn't about this whole thing was not about Trump or Biden. It was about the constitutional process. It was about the election process and us having faith in elections and the process being followed. But Sam, what we're seeing, I mean, this is the part that bothers me the most. It is literally a mirror image of 1931, 32, 33 in Germany. The limitation on free speech and using safety as a reason to not allow people to assemble, using emergency powers to take away those rights. That people of Germany had all the same things we have in our Bill of Rights in early 1930s. And then the Reichstag fire that was used to literally implement and the Enabling Act and ultimately hand over the dictatorial powers to Hitler. I mean, that sounds far-fetched, but we're watching those types of things happen very, very similar to what happened less than 100 years ago. And I don't say that to scare people. I say that to say, study history. Let's make sure we don't repeat those kind of mistakes. And let's get informed and get active because, I mean, there is no question what the other side wants. They're shouting it from the rooftops right now. I mean, they literally want to silence. We're what?
We're the new Jews.
Well, I'm telling you. Have you seen that?
We're the new Jews and gays.
Yeah, we saw there was a meme the other day that had you would have a blue mask or a red mask depending on whether or not you'd been vaccinated yet. And somebody shared that and said all they need to do is add the gold star. I mean, it is literally I have to laugh to not cry. I mean, I am. It's that serious. But we can. I mean, you're right. The getting through how the whole. I think the whole thing this year was God's winnowing of the church and separating the wheat from the chaff. And we've seen some great patriots stand up, that pastors that have said, no, government's not going to tell us when we can worship and whether or not we can sing. And those are the kind of people that it's going to take for us to come back from this and to be able to hold the nation together. But yet be able to live in freedom. We got a long haul ahead of us. This is not going to be overnight. It's not going to be one election. But I will say, let me kind of give a good news here. Let's not forget on election night that we did push back against all this wokeism and everything else. And we elected a ton of new good legislators at the state level across the country, a ton of new pro-life members of the Congress. We took seats they said we couldn't win in the House. They didn't get all the Senate seats that they thought they were going to get. So there were a lot of victories on election night. And if we do this right, we can regain the momentum that we had on election night going into 2022. But it's going to take hard work. Freedom is not simple. It's not easy. It takes work on our part.
But I have to ask you, because nothing's being done as far as I can see, simply because there are no legal challenges now.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm misspeaking, but I believe they've all been basically swept to the side. The deed is done. How can we ever trust our election system again, especially when there's no forensic and no attempt to clean it up, or a very limited attempt to clean it up? I know there are some good patriots out there who've been working behind the scenes for years, just trying to clean the voter rolls. But if you can stuff the ballots with any number of transplants, new people, pre-signed ballots, unfolded mail-in ballots that were clearly never mailed, come on.
Yeah, those who broke the law and the Constitution this time around, they got away with it. They have won. They have won that illegal battle, no doubt about it. But the good news is this fight is actually at the state level, and all of our state legislatures are beginning to meet this month. That's where we have to change this and tighten up the law. We will not have faith in our elections if we don't have transparency, if we don't have a verification process when it's close, and we don't have legal remedies whenever people violate the law, either by changing the rules or by preventing people from being able to watch when it's happening, all the things that happen. Sam, I don't know if you know this. I had a recount in my first race. It was very, very close. I lost by 20 votes out of 30,000. We had a recount. We looked at every ballot together. My opponent and I and our teams, we looked at every ballot. I ended up winning by 36 votes. So we found ballots that the machine had misread, and I ended up winning. Well, I said to my opponent, I said, the law allows you to have a second recount just to make sure we got this right. He said, why would I do that? We looked at every ballot together. You won. I don't like the fact you won, but you won. Nobody claimed cheating. Nobody said the system's rigged, all of that. So if you have transparency, if you have verification, and you have legal remedies, people will have faith in the process. And the state legislatures are the ones that have to do that. And so I am encouraging all citizens, that should be your number one item in lobbying your state legislature. Right now, literally, they're starting to meet this week and next week in almost every state. And number two is you've got to get rid of these emergency powers for governors, or you've got to at least limit them to a few days. And then the legislature has to sign off on that. That's the two big issues this session, where we can have significant gains in restoring our republic. But that you're right. I mean, we've lost the current election battle, and even those elections in the Senate that, same thing happened there again.
Yeah.
But it brings it back home to us. Now you got to talk to your legislators, and don't let them, what they'll do. The left loves taking our terms, right? So election integrity, they're going to use those words to start doing their agenda, which is no voter ID and all of these things that they do that actually are the opposite of election integrity. So
Right.
Get really specific. I think Daniel Horowitz has some really good proposals for what needs to be done. Get really specific. Make sure voter ID is required, paper ballots that we can go back to and verify. There's significant things that need to be done, and they won't happen in a lot of the blue states. I realize that, but
we're fighting. I agree with you. It's an even bigger battle than that, because, and to a large extent, it's a spiritual battle. Yeah. There are people who are in leadership today who don't believe in the vote. They'd rather not have a vote. They don't believe in life. They'd rather not have to deal with certain human beings, and they'd be perfectly okay with killing them. I don't say this lightly, but it's the truth. And the way that we've been teaching our children in school, we're teaching them that America really hasn't any value and it's not worth preserving and it needs to be changed. And the Constitution, it might have served a purpose, but it's systemically racist and it's a terrible document and all of these things. And so they've muddied the water to such a degree that it's going to be hard to find the remnant, the people who are really I don't mean it's going to be hard to find them. What I mean is we are so diluted at this point that it's going to take a very strong small kernel of people who really believe this. And when I see people out there denouncing here's the thing. The people who showed up in Washington, by and large, mostly peaceful, but we're not allowed to say it was a mostly peaceful protest. And by the way, nothing got burned down. Nothing was destroyed. Okay, there was some damage, but you can't call that destroyed. A window broken is not a destruction of a building. And that shouldn't have happened. Everybody agrees that shouldn't have happened.
Right. Hey, what you said a while ago is really important. You put your finger on it. What you're identifying is what's been festering underneath for nearly 100 years now. The real root cause of all of this is civic ignorance, not knowing who we are as a people, where we came from, what we actually did as a people. So we've bought the Marxist lies all year long about how evil America is.
Right.
And we've lost the formula that produced our nation. George Washington said in his farewell address, he said, religion and morality are indispensable supports of political prosperity. What we saw on Wednesday was not political prosperity. What we've seen all year long is not political prosperity. We're losing freedom and unity and all of those things. Why? Because we lost religion and morality. At the heart of it, our nation became the most powerful, most free, most benevolent, most prosperous nation in history. Why? Because of the biblical influence, because of the religion and morality. That's what produces liberty. You can't have liberty if you don't have morality, and you don't have morality if you don't have religion. And that's why the salt and light has to happen again. There has to be this influence on the culture from the answers that are true. And we know that biblical influence produced what we have. We've got about 4,000 Constitution coaches around the country now that are hosting these classes in their living rooms or their churches. And now we've got this new course coming out called Biblical Citizenship in Modern America, with Kirk Cameron and a bunch of folks like that giving the story of the secret sauce that produced this. That's what we've lost. And most of the nation is no longer has a biblical worldview. So that's what we're up against. We've lost the culture war. And so now we have to come back and not just win elections. We have to win the culture. Entertainment, what you guys do. I mean, we abdicated entertainment for so long. The church did, and let the other side have it. And the high priest of thought in our nation became the values you got from the movies when you sat down. So what y'all are doing in entertainment and others are doing to take that back and actually use it as a realm of influence is vital. We got to do the same thing in journalism and education and all of these areas that we just stepped out of. I mean, frankly, the church failed when it stepped back and stopped being salt and light. So if we're truly going to fulfill the Great Commission, we have to make disciples. And we do that by what Jesus said, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. We got to stop thinking that being the church is 52 salvation messages a year. It's making disciples. It's applying the best answer book in the history of mankind, the one given to us by the Creator, actually applying that to our lives, including how we form our neighborhoods and our communities and our states, how our government works. The Bible speaks to all of that and has all the best answers and all the best lessons. But, you had a great example earlier. I mean, we're like the children of Israel. We watched all the miracles happen, and then we turn around and we worship these false gods. Now, instead of the golden calves now are pseudoscience and government. They're going to solve all our problems. So we got to wake people up and shake them out of their slumber and get them convicted and teach them truth, and then get the action going. I'm not guaranteeing it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen to America. We may be marching off to 70 years of captivity, but that's when God said, I know the plans I have for you, right? We got it on the coffee mugs. We got it on the pillows. We love talking about, I know the plans I have for you. We forget they were headed off to 70 years of captivity. I hope that's not happening, but let's just know God is in charge. We have a role to play, and we know what to do if we'll just do it.
Right. I'm in the book of Ezekiel right now, and it's pretty sobering. And we've got every paragraph ends with, "And then you will know that I am your God." And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa. So tell me just before we go, uh, final thoughts on what's next for Donald Trump.
Mm. I think Wednesday they did a pretty good job of trying to destroy any future opportunity for him to come back in 1824. Can't be unless he has a DeLorean that goes back in time. That would be hard to come back in 2024. I think even more important than the potential of him coming back as president is for him to take this movement and use it in a positive way to go ahead and do that 1776 commission and continue that restoration of loving America for what we've actually done in our totality. So I think he could still do that. And maybe he does media and starts a network and all of those things. They're going to do everything they can to keep him, to ruin his credibility. That's why these lies right now are being told about what he actually said and did over the last few days. So I think whether he does that or not, we need to capture the movement and do that. Trump has always just been the figurehead of 80 million people that love America and love our Constitution. And so we need a lot of folks in communities to rise up and capture that and move forward with that movement, running for city council, school board, county commissioner, create sanctuary counties where we're not going to allow this COVID fascism anymore. We're not going to allow some of the things that are going to come down the pike from these Marxists that have taken over our federal government. We're going to need some safe havens and some sanctuary counties to prevent that stuff from happening. So we're going to have to be a lot of little mini Trumpers, I guess, around the country. And I think that's there. I think there are a lot of great folks that can do that. And I know God's raising up a remnant. I love your Gideon analogy. I mean, I think there is a remnant being raised up. I'm spoiled because I get to work with young people every year, and I see these young kids come into the Capitol and they debate and they're passionate about biblical worldview and about how to do these things. So I'm a little bit biased and more optimistic than most people because I see what God's doing with that remnant that's coming. But that's there's something every one of us can do. Let's go be we the people and do our part to take this thing back.
Right. Okay. So my guest has been Rick Green, and you do a daily show, right, with David Barton called Wall Builders.
Yeah, Wall Builders Live. We're on about 300 stations around the country, but you can listen on any podcast or at wallbuilderslive.com. And we're very, very Joshua Caleb oriented. We even have our Friday programs called Good News Friday. Even in the midst of all this, we did a Good News Friday. So there's still good things happening out there, and we can have joy based on whose we are, not based on who's in the White House.
That's right. And I encourage people to take a 30,000 foot eternal sort of view of things that, by the way, it's just not that bad. It looks bad, but it isn't bad. We still are the United States of America. And so until it gets bad, let's not behave as if it is bad, but behave as if it can be better. And it can always be better, right? Amen.
Amen. And hey, look, it's not 1863. It's not 1763. It's not 1,000 years ago when persecution of the church was, just when you compare to those things, you go, wait, we got it pretty good. Not to be Pollyanna about it. We have real challenges and it requires real work, but you nailed it. I mean, we're still very, very blessed to live where we live at the time that we live.
Right. So disappointed, but not
deterred.
What's that?
Disappointed, but not deterred.
Not deterred, exactly. Rick Green, thanks so much for joining me. And thank you for joining us on the Sam Sorbo Show. We'll see you next time.